For my final creative project in this course, I'll be role-playing 3 women of pre-modern histories and texts and doing a video project in a style of almost documentary-like. These women will be role-played with respect to personality, background of when and where they came from, the social class from which they came, and any keen physical attributes. With each woman, they will be responding to the themes of this project, which are vanity, agency via sexuality and gender, and their continual estimation. These women that I've selected are Hispalas from Livy's The History of Rome, Empress Theodora as portrayed in Procopius's The Secret History, and Joan of Arc from the writings of Christine de Pizan in the Book of Ladies. These women are a former actress, a former prostitute, and a martyr, and they are speaking out.
I am now a freed woman, but I was a former prostitute. What I am most famous for, though, is my testimony which indicted thousands of Romans, including nobles. I had a young male friend who I later named as heir, and when I found out he was being indicted and brought into these Bacchic rituals, I had to take notice and give my testimony against this ritual, because at these rituals, they sodomized the men, there were rapes, drinking, nudity, all the worst causes and places to be, which was no place for this young, dear friend of mine, which is why I testified. And in return for my testimony, I was granted money, rights over land, marriage, and given the status of lady so that my past as a prostitute could no longer define who I was.
I am Theodora. I rose from being a low-class stage actress to Empress of Rome and wife to Justinian. I earned my keep when I was younger through my theatrical talents, and of course those backstage mannerisms are how I survived, honestly. And I expressed my agency quite directly. First off, I was really important in the passing of this new law which allowed women of a slightly lower class to marry those of higher status, which is how I was able to marry Justinian, who was the heir to the throne. Now, I win it because I expressed my agency in a much more direct manner, such as, controlling the courts of the Roman Empire, having a direct effect of people's lives, taking what land I saw fit to take, and I have such a perspectives on that sexuality topic.
I'm Joan of Arc, and I am the national hero of France and a feminist martyr in their eyes. I fought in the 100 Years' War, which made me a national hero. I began seeing these visions of saints, the angel Michael, and they all told me to go fight for my country. I fought alongside generals from around 1428 to 1430. I was finally captured by the English in 1430, captured as a prisoner of war, and then brought to trial. The English courts charged me with heresy against their gods and for cross-dressing, since I did not fit the female attire and aspirations of what one woman should look like. And I was burned for this at the stake at the tender age of 19. Years later, after my trial and burning, a court reviewed my projects, saying that the charges were false and that I should be made as a martyr and a saint for my work for France.
Vanity throughout the ages has had a very negative connotation when applied to women. There were the Jezebels who spent their very last minutes even spending time upon primping before death, to the fact that the patriarchal society demanded women to beautify themselves with painful cosmetic practices and even applying makeup, which was dangerous to their health. Now let's see how each of these women, Hispala, Theodora, and Joan of Arc, either fulfilled or rebuked this concept of vanity.
In my former profession as a courtesan, I had to be vain. I had to appear nice, dress well, and my clothes and looks signified what my job was, and the fact was I needed to attract men to make a living. Even though now, as a former slave, freed slave at that, and of lady status, I still dress in such a provocative way, not to attract the customers, but for my own pride and sense of being. Through my testimony, I achieved the status of lady, and the fact is that my past as a slave and prostitute were no longer part of my people's judgment of me. Now, for this, my vanity is for myself and not for the customers. The vanity is an expression of my pride and respect of myself.
Procopius was a contemporary of mine, and in his novel, The Secret History, he wrote me in a very negative way, especially with aspects of my vanity and my self-care. He went as far as to say that shame, being myself, spent quite unnecessary attention, and that it was never enough to satisfy me. But for vanity as it is, as an empress, it is important that I am looking my best, I am being an impression of higher class, and my past as an actress allowed me to know about these trends and indulgences for that. Now, the time I spent on myself garnered the attention of many people, but it also left the air of me being important, and my time was worth something. For counsel, they'd be lined up in the hallways, just waiting until I found it time to show myself, and then they'd fall over themselves for my respected time and opinion. My vanity was an aspect of gaining respect from the nation that I ruled.
During battle, there is no time to be vain. Vanity is not an option. So, in my own attire, I dressed in the men's battle attire for protection and as further symbology of the religious war from which I was fighting, through the visions that were granted me by the saints. Now, this caused issues within the English church when they were persecuting me, for I did not fit the vain expectations of what their ladies and women looked like. I cross-dressed, I was in pants, I had weaponry, and this, even though I did not fit the expectation of a woman, I am still portrayed as a national heroine of France and seen as one of the feminist martyrs, without portraying the standards of beauty in the French society, such as Marie Antoinette.
A woman's cuttingness and agency is most often tied to her use of sexuality and fulfillment of the gender roles for a biological female. Our women come from backgrounds where it was very common for a young Caspalla or Theodora to use these sexual traits and acts to maintain a lifestyle and to live. But in contrast, there's Joan of Arc, who was burned at the stake for not ascribing to her gender roles by cross-dressing, and nor was she known for any sort of nefarious sexual act, for she was a virgin and a martyr. The fulfillment of the typical gender roles and use of my sexuality is how I garnered my status, going from a slave courtesan to a freed woman. My sexuality and performance of sexual skills, and my skill at performing these skills, was how I moved from a slave onto a freed woman. The men paid me, and my payment went to making myself a better life and living. When my testimony against the Bacchanalian rituals arrived, it was within that agreement that I receive better status, and my gender role changed into that of a lady.
Well, for addressing my use of sexuality and the gender roles which I fulfilled as a Roman empress and wife of Justinian, well, Mallet sums it up best. He said I was Justinian's consort. I was a woman of the lowest birth and the worst class. And I mean, yes, it was true. I was an actress, not a woman of high class. And yes, while being an actress, I had to apply my skills offstage to survive. But once married to Justinian, my sexuality and use of it changed. I no longer had to rely upon it for my daily life. Instead, I rebuked the roles of a typical Roman empress. I began to garner control, publicly. This wasn't a backstage hand, telling Justinian what should change. I garnered the control of the entire judicial system. I controlled charges which were pressed. I had control over the judges declaring who was guilty and who was not. And I used this involvement to take the lands that I coveted. I would exile men, I would put them to death. A very direct and typically a more masculine approach to gaining what I wanted in the lands I wanted to take over. I did not fit this expected general in my role as empress.
Well, the discussion of sexuality and gender roles is a bit complex for me. I'm seen as a virginal aspect, as pure and young, and my gender roles, as discussed in Vanity, I was non-conforming. I wore the attire of men, and Hoflinger writes that I was even thusly accused of trespassing the conduct of gender through visual signs and representation. For my sexuality, I did not go about it through ways that women in war have. I did not try to seduce the generals. I did not have any sort of sexual appeal through the men I was fighting with. I was instead focused on the war itself, the individual battles, and how I conducted myself was not that as seen of a woman. My conduct was that of bold ambition and obvious flex, not of which I hid through sexual favors of the opposing side.
Though I wish underestimation upon no one, in these cases it had helped the women. Through underestimation, they were granted access to secret rituals, they were able to win battles through underestimation, and even control the courts of a powerful empire. The underestimation aided the women, because if they had been treated as equals to the men, there would have been suspicions raised, they would not have been allowed access, and their victories would have been smaller and fewer. In my life, there were two key moments of underestimation. The first was when I was still a slave, and no one thought I'd be anything else. I was brought into the Bacchic rituals where I saw the sodomy of men and the lewd acts performed. The second being at my testimony, where it was brought into question my reliability and how much they could trust me as a source of information due to the fact, that I was a former courtesan and only then a freed woman. Being underestimated allowed me to see these rituals, give my testimony, and achieve money, land, marriage rights, and even more respect as a lady of higher status.
As for underestimation, I serve as a reason not to underestimate a woman. I came from the lowest of the lows, a stage actress, a woman who applied sex for living, to becoming the Roman empress, wife of Justinian. This was a move that no one could have expected, one that was even illegal up until the courtship of Justinian and I. And though it may not be directly attributed, I consider myself to be attributed for the fact that it now became legal and possible for a woman of a lower status to marry upwards a man of much higher status than herself. Through this, the Roman Empire had learned not to underestimate me. I came from stage actress to empress, and in my role as empress, I took control of the courts. By controlling the courts, I controlled the land and the nation. I would decide who lived within the nation, who got exiled, who died, and what lands I took for myself. My underestimation ended shortly, clearly after I was granted the position of empress.
The underestimation was present throughout my lifetime. The generals, my people, and even future contemporaries underestimated me. When my visions began, I was merely a teenager living out in Domremy, the French countryside. Though my visions led me to military prowess through fighting in the 100 Years' War and becoming a national heroine, there were still questions about it. And even today, and then, people questioned whether my visions were me lying, trying to garner attention, whether it was a medical malignancy such as epilepsy or such. And though I was successful militarily, I was still questioned because I was merely a female, and a young female at that. And I'd even swear that the farmer's pig often had much more respect than myself. This underestimation, though, did not limit my aspirations for myself, my power, or my aspirations in fight for France.
Hispalia, Empress Theodora, and Joan of Arc used their sexuality and gender, vanity, and the general underestimation of themselves, all which are traits downplayed or thought of as weaknesses, as means to an end. These women used the feminine qualities to indict thousands of people, to become a national heroine, to co-rule the Roman Empire. These traditionally negative qualities were spun and made to make these women memorable, successful, and worthy of notice even within the pre-modern histories, which were written by men for other educated men. So the women were often overlooked and underwritten. These were the portrayals of a former actress, a former prostitute, and a martyr, all speaking out.